recently, I've actually had the opportunity to join another organization that is 100% driven by excellence, right? That starts at the very foundation, at the root of their culture, right? Their mission, their vision, and their values. So I was with a company called K&N Management for 23 years. They had 2 restaurant groups in Austin, Rudy's Country Store and Barbecue, and Mighty Fine Burgers and Shakes. And of course, now I'm with SportClips. And again, I'm so fortunate to be part of this team. So I'm delighted to be here today just to get to share with you just some best practices around how you as a leader can build a culture of excellence in your own organization. So the truth is that culture exists in any organization. The problem is that culture is either the monster that the employees feed, right? Or the team that the people nurture. Okay, so it's really important then that leaders are very, very intentionally in creating the right culture in their organization. So during my time at K&N Management, really over the last 11 years, I had the opportunity to share best practices with over 2,000 individuals from over 160 organizations that visited K&N Management. And so I will say that one of the things that most of the people that visited were looking for was something magical, right? Some magic thing that we were doing, right? What were we doing? And what little pill could we give them and they would instantly be excellent? And it was so hard to help them understand that really what we were doing was pretty common. What we were doing wasn't different, but what we did was do it very, very well. We did it in an uncommon way. It's very similar at SportClips, right? We're cutting hair, right? We're providing haircuts. But it's not just a haircut, right? It's actually experience. Because for a lot of the clients that come into the stores, they've got a lot of things happening, right? It could be getting ready for graduation, right? It could be getting ready for a wedding or a birthday or their first job, right? Or job interview. And so when you look at it that way, everything that you do may seem common, but it's how you do it. And if you do it in an uncommon way, that's what's really excellent. So let's start first with culture. So what is really culture anyway? Culture is simply the collection of values, right? Expectations and practices, right? That guide and inform the actions of all team members. Okay, so it's the traits that essentially make up a company. It's how we do things around here. And culture can drive success and sustainability. Okay, culture also determines who joins and who stays. So if you look at these statistics, 77% of people, when they're going to look for a job, they're going to do a little research beforehand. And they're going to consider the culture of that organization before they decide if they want to apply. And then on the other side, for 65% of people, culture is the main reason why they stay. So that is why it is so critical for leaders to be very, very intentional then about the type of culture that they want in their organization. So culture, right, and an excellent culture consists of these things right here. One is clarity, which we will talk about. It's about your mission, your vision, your values. It's about people, right? The people that are in your organization. It's about having the right people. It's about making sure that you bring them on board right, that you train, that you coach, that you develop, and then it's about engagement too. But an excellent culture also involves processes, right? So excellent processes that create consistent outcomes, that deliver expectations, and then also provide measurements on how you're performing. And then finally, the fourth component of an excellent culture is the concept of continuous improvement, right? That's through benchmarking and studying and learning from others. It's about innovations, right, that come from within, change leadership, and then overall strategy, right? What is your roadmap to take you from where you are now to where you want to be? So I'm going to cover each of these different components. So let's start with clarity. And so I have listened to a really great speaker. He's also a great author. His name is Andy Stanley. And what he talks about, when you really think about culture, it's about clarity. Okay, so clarity is magnetic. And if you have a really powerful purpose and meaning for your organization, people follow that, right? It's magnetic. People want to be a part of that. Clarity is also memorable, right? You can remember these things. And when you remember them, they're portable. Like, how many times have you ever looked at an organization, or maybe you even worked for one, where the mission and the vision and the values of the company were literally paragraphs that lived in some handbook, right? That nobody even looked at, nobody even knew. And if you were to ask someone, hey, what is the mission of this company? They would say, I don't know what's a mission, right? I have no idea. Well, a mission is really, really critical, because a mission is really the company's purpose, right? It's why. It's why are you there? And it provides direction for all of the team members, right? When they clearly know the mission statement, right? Because it is so clearly and compellingly casted across the organization, right? It's repeated regularly. It's portable, right? Because it's memorable. Then it really drives the direction of the team members, right? And so it tells us, what do? We create championship haircuts. That's what we do, right? Who do we do it for? Very specifically, well, pretty much anybody, but mostly for men and boys, right? And whom do we do it for? And how we also do that in a very exciting sports environment, right? That is clear. That is crystal clear to all of our people, right? So when they come into work every day, they know what they're supposed to do, right? They create a championship haircut. And even at the support team, what are we there for? We're there to support the people, right, that create a championship haircut. So clarity is magnetic, right? People follow clarity and they understand it. Same thing with the vision statement, right? And so if you have a very clear vision statement, it's simply the preferred future state of the company, right? It's your goal, it's your wish, it's your what. What do we want to do? What do we want to achieve? Where do we want to be? Whereas your mission grounds you daily, right? It's how you do your job every day, right? We go in every day and we create a championship haircut, right? Or we go into work and we do our job the best we can so we can support the people that create a championship haircut. The vision is where we want to be. It's why we do the mission every day. It's so that we can be the dominant male hair care chain in the nation, right? That's the future state. But again, when it's so clear and crystal clear to all of your people, they know this is what I do every day so that we can get there, right? Clarity is magnetic and people follow clarity, right? And it's simply stated so that it's memorable, and the memorable is portable. You can look at some other missions, that are a little bit vague, hard to understand. Even vision statements, they don't really give you that punch in the gut on where you want to go. Like, for example, GE had one, right? Where they wanted to be number 1 or 2 in their market. Well, I don't know. When I come into work, do I say, do I want to be number 1 today? Or do I want to be number 2 today? Because I can tell you right now that if your people are asking that question every day, probably most of them are going to say, I feel like number 2 today, right? Got a lot going on in my personal life and I don't really feel like being number 1 today. Whereas our people come in every day and they create a championship haircut because they know that we want to be the dominant male haircut chain in the nation, right? So very, very clear. All right, clarity. Number 2 is people. All right, you got to have the right people on the bus. And the best way to get the right people on the bus is to start with selection. That is the number 1 most important thing you can do as a leader, is to make sure that you're selecting the best people. So we use a method called top grading. It's based on a book by a gentleman named Brad Smart. At K&M, we started using it in 2005. We're now using it at SportClips. And I'm telling you, it is the best method that you can use to make sure you're getting the right people on the bus, right? And you're selecting the right folks. And it's nothing that's fancy, right? It's nothing that's ingenious, right? It's simply discipline. Discipline to follow a structured hiring and interviewing process. That's simply it. It's a very simple process. You're checking with every applicant. You're asking the same interview. You're following, you're starting with school history. You're moving into work history, and then you are asking a lot of questions around competencies. But you have to be disciplined to do the same process every single time if you want to get the best results. All right, so once you've selected the right people on the bus, the next step then is onboarding. And so I learned years ago from the Ritz-Carlton that you cannot just hire them and put them to work, right? So if you just hire them and you say, okay, start your job and just ask questions later, right? Okay, that is not how you retain them at all. So what we learned from the Ritz-Carlton years ago is that you really have to create an impression on that very first day, right? They need to get completely immersed in your culture on the very first day. They need to know what's important. They need to know the mission, the vision, the values of the company, right? They need to really, really connect to the organization. If you don't do that, studies say that most people will leave the job, right, within 6 months if they haven't been properly onboarded. It's just a fact. So it's critical that you really make that connection on the very first day. So that's their onboarding. The next thing is training, right? Who has ever started a job and they had no idea what they were doing and they were given no training and they had to just wing it themselves, right? Is that comfortable? No, it's part of that learning zone where it's like pretty much essentially you got thrown in the deep end and you can't swim and you have to like basically figure it out yourself or you're going to sink, right? Some of us can thrive in that and manage pretty quickly. Others have sink pretty quick, right? Because they need to have that training. And so for training, it's really about setting them up for success, right? Giving them the tools that they need, right? And then making sure that you help them along the way. So at K&N Management, we used a method called Tell, Show, Do, Review. It was really super simple. I mean, we actually called these things like Barney style, where we would like give it to them Barney style, right? So it's like breaking it down in little chunks. And so we would do this method called Tell, Show, Do, Review, where you basically are telling them what they're going to learn, right? And then you show them the task. You let them do it while you observe to make sure that they truly understood how to do it. And then you just reviewed what you learned. And so we would use a complete checklist pattern. And so for every single task that they needed to learn, we went through this Tell, Show, Do, Review so that at the end of training, they felt confidence in their ability to do their job. And once they really understand how to do their job, then you can work on what we call coaching, right? Coaching and development, where you're really helping them reach their potential, right? So they've learned the fundamentals of their job during training, but now it's your job as a supervisor to give them ongoing coaching and feedback, right? And more additional tools that they need so that they can reach their potential. So another thing that we did at K&N that was really, really effective is that we identified non-negotiables for the job. So for a restaurant manager, they had 12 non-negotiables. And these were the things that they had to focus on every single day if they wanted to be successful. Okay, so some of these non-negotiables were things like coaching, right? Where they had to coach their people and give feedback to them every day on a daily basis. Other things were like knowing how to use their resources, right? So manuals are only so great as long as they're used. And so that was actually a non-negotiable for our managers. They had to know how to go and look for information. And so we trained this for new managers when they were hiring, but then we also focused on them throughout the year. Okay, what does it truly mean when you're thinking about a non-negotiable of guest feedback? Like how you take guest feedback and respond to guest feedback. Another thing with people too is investing in career paths. So every team member should really know what the avenue is for growth. So at K&N, we had defined career paths so that everyone at every starting position knew their career path. Because quite frankly, a cashier, they might be 19 years old, but they really want to know on their start date, well, in 3 months, can I be a general manager? Well, it doesn't quite work like that, but let me show you on a roadmap of what you need to do in every milestone until you can become a general manager. Another part of people is a new thing called stay interviews. And so we're doing these at SportClips, and they're really, really effective. So a lot of times people wait until that exit interview, right? So they've already resigned, they've turned in their notice, and they're like, what could I have done to keep you? Well, it's a little bit late at that point, right? Like, why am I waiting now, 2 weeks before this person's last day, to find out what could I have done differently to keep them? And so the idea of a stay interview is to have a conversation at least once a year with your direct reports so that you can think about how do we actively keep you engaged in the job, or find out what else would you like to learn? What are your goals? But also too, what's more important is how to connect with them one-on-one. Like, what's going on in your life, right? Anything big happening, right? Really trying to connect with this team member so you can think about how do I keep them actively here, actively engaged on the job. And then one final thought on people, and that's about the idea of community. And I will say that SportClips has an amazing community, right? Whether it's in the store or it's at the support team, the idea of community is really, really so close and so tight there. And so everybody wants to be part of a community. So the more you can create opportunities for them to be a part of that community, whether it's volunteering and giving back, it's pep rallies and fun times where you can get together, right? And just share things and have some fun together outside of work, right? So pep rallies, or even other opportunities and events. I know we have a national huddle coming up in September, and it's an opportunity for everybody to get together from across the country and just be part of this great community. Okay, the third component, processes. I know everyone hates that word, processes, right? It sounds so boring. Nobody wants to do them. It sounds like you're, on assembly line, making widgets. And so when you think about processes, though, processes are critical for every organization. And so when you think about process, it's really kind of simple. You don't have to overcomplicate them. It's simply a checklist, right? It's a checklist that gets you from point A to point B consistently every time. That's it. It can be a chart if you really want it to be, right? But it's simply a checklist of steps. Really, really critical to processes, though, is to understand, too, what your key business drivers are. right? And so when you think about a key business drivers truly are those things that are driving the success of a business. And your key business drivers are based on what your customers expect or require, what drives the success of your business, and also what differentiates you from your competitors. And so when you think about processes have to support those key business drivers, right? That's how you execute your key business drivers. So, at K&N Management, the restaurants, we had 8 different key business drivers. Okay, 8 sounds like a lot, but 8 key business drivers. These are the things that really did drive the success of the company. They were drivers like food quality, right? Speed of service, accuracy, cleanliness, hospitality, right? Energy, that's a different one, right? Team members, all of the people that were in the organization, and value. And so we had processes for every one of those key business drivers, right? We had processes to make sure we were executing food quality consistently every day. And then we had measures too. And when you're thinking about processes and you think about, well, how do I even start to write one? Think about this. A good key process is simple. It has to be simple or they're not going to follow it consistently, right? So I used to kind of use this example. Like in the restaurants, we had a process for the bussers to maintain the restroom, right? And so it was simply a checklist of the things that they would service every 30 minutes throughout the day. So what would be silly is to write something into the process like this. Okay, step 1, look at the mirror, right? Step 2, get a spray bottle and a clean towel and squirt 6 squirts of Windex on the glass. And then in a counterclockwise manner, clean the glass, right? How do you know they're going to do it that way, right? No, absolutely not. Instead, the process is step 1, with Windex and a clean towel, you clean the mirror, right? So simple, right? That's simple. So a good process is going to be really simple to follow, which means it's repeatable, right? It means that they're going to do it the same time, the same way every time. It's also teachable, okay? That means that you can teach someone else how to do that process because it's simple and it's repeatable, right? And then it's measurable. So every process, you should be able to measure if they did it correctly, and then the outcome of that process. And then really important is that a good key process is improvable, meaning you can look at it and you can review it and you can identify where the gap might be. And so that is why it's so important that when you do have a good key process, it's written down, right? It's documented, because there's nothing worse than if someone can't come into work that day, you got to figure out what was in their head, right? And how to do that job. And so documented processes are essential for making sure it's simple, it's repeatable, it's teachable, it's measurable, and it's improvable. And then standardized processes make us better. So at K&N back in 2007, we went through a very difficult year that year of documenting all of our processes. All right. And so we started to talk about standardization, and you all had to do it the same way. And imagine telling a 19-year-old that they have to do it just like this person over here, right? And they're like, oh, really? Corporate office. Yeah. When was the last time you portioned French fries? I bet you could really tell me the best way to do my job, right? And so you had to really learn to teach them the value of standardization. So for most of us, standardization means what? well, or like what we're used to being taught is about like in tests, like a standardized test, right? You're just taking it to pass, right? So you're just going through the steps to just pass it or do the process. So when you think about standardization, it is so much more than that. So standardization means that our customers have the same experience every single time wherever they go. And it doesn't matter, right? They don't have a favorite store, right? Because this one does a little better over here, right? Or a favorite store because these people are a little bit nicer, right? Or this one's a little bit cleaner, right? They can go to any store because they know they're going to get the same great experience every single time in a championship haircut, right? So standardization is perfect for our clients. Standardization also means that it's teachable, right? It's teachable because we're all doing it the same way. It's not, oh, well, I do it my way. They might do it their way, but this is the right way to do it over here. And then you're training the next day with something, they're like, oh, no. Don't pay attention to what they said, right? This is the right way to do it, right? And so if you're in training, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, right? I don't know what to do. I don't know what's right. I don't know what's wrong. And you're really, really stressed. And then what do you ultimately do? You leave sometimes, or you just take a blend of what these people are showing you. Now you've got your own way to teach somebody, right? Instead of the right way. So standardization is so much better for people, right? For training. And then ultimately too, standardization means that we can improve it, right? And we can be more excellent, right? Because we can literally look at the standardized process and we can determine what happened. And so if processes are standardized and something goes wrong, right? You as a leader have the comfort to know either they didn't follow the process, okay? We can fix that pretty quickly, right? A little retraining, a little coaching. Or if it's happening multiple times, then it's something wrong with the process. But that's it, right? It's pretty simple. They either didn't do it or it's potentially something wrong with the process. So again, when you're standardized and everybody's doing it the right way, you can very quickly as a leader go in and correct something. I love this quote by Deming, right? It's pretty simple. If you can't describe what you were doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. Essentially, right? If it's all in someone's head, we don't really know what we're doing. All right. So the last thing, continuous improvement. I love this quote too, right? How many times have you heard that? Or we go, oh, I don't know, we've always done it this way. Oh, why do you still have to like send a checklist like to the daily? I don't know, we've always done it this way, right? So that's really a dangerous phrase. We should always be trying to improve, right? That should be your goal as a leader, right? If you want to have a culture of excellence, you got to be driving improvement. And so how do you know if you need to improve something? One, benchmarking, right? So who's doing it better than you are? And so that was one of the non-negotiables as a leader when I was at K&N was benchmarking, right? We had to constantly be looking at and learning from others. It's how we had some, hey, we weren't geniuses at K&N. We would learn something, right? We would implement it 100%, right? We were super disciplined that way. It's not that we were geniuses, right? We like to say we weren't rocket scientists, but you know, we were very, very disciplined. So we would learn what other people were doing. They were doing it better than we were. So that's benchmarking. You can do those a variety of ways, right? You can either read about it, maybe you visit it, like you go to the store or a restaurant or another, hair place, and you learn something that they're doing better than you are. You can also benchmark by actually talking to people, right? Networking is so great, and I think people are so much more open now with sharing than they used to be. So you can actually have that conversation and through networking. But benchmarking is also reading books, listening podcasts, all of these different ways that you can benchmark and learn from someone who's doing it better than you are. Also measures and audits, right? So it goes back to those processes, right? If something goes wrong, right, whether your measures are telling you that, your clients are telling you that, or audits might tell you that, right? That's another way that you can identify we need to improve something, improve a process. And then also too, your clients, right, your guests, your customers, they might give you suggestions, okay? And that might tell you where you need to improve. And then what I really love, and that's your people. That's capitalizing on the ideas of your people, right? That's internal benchmarking. So having a really effective way where they can give you their ideas and you can capture them. Strategic planning is the roadmap, right? So it's your focus. It's your annual focus for the year, right? Strategic planning is your roadmap that gets you where you want to go, right? Because you can't hope that things are going to get better, right? Hope is not a strategy. You can't hope that hiring is going to, I mean, like, raise your hand if you are fully staffed. Anyone? No, exactly, right? We cannot all sit here and hope that hiring gets better, right? Because it doesn't look like it's going to get better anytime in the near future. So we have to make sure we have a strategy to try to hire as many people as we can, okay? Because again, hope is not a strategy. We can't hope, right, that costs go down, right? We have to make sure that we have a strategy to look for opportunities to save costs wherever we can. But I think the really most important part about continuous improvement that so many people just don't do well, and that's change leadership. Because if you're going to change something, you got to make sure that you get buy-in. And the best way to do that is through leadership, right? And leaders really knowing and understanding how to lead change, right? So, I have to go back again to K&M management, and I'm going to share with you something that we learned there. But we had that year of 2007, we had all of those standardized processes that we were implementing. We were making so many changes that year. And so, you know, it was a really tough year. That was the highest turnover we'd ever had in the whole time of the company because we didn't lead change well. Okay, and I'm going to share with you our lessons there, but we were not good at leading change. And so people were really, really frustrated and left. Some people needed to leave, but a lot of people, you know, might have stayed and grown with us if we had known how to lead change correctly. So here are some of the reasons why change fails. Number one, change isn't connected to the mission, the vision, the values, or the key business drivers, right? You're not giving them the why, right? And that's what they really want to know. When you're asking someone to do something differently, they want to know why, right? And so you have to connect them back to what's important to the organization, right? To the culture. Change will also fail because there is no absence of accountability and no follow-up. So back in that year in 2007, when I was back at K&M management, we would sit around a table with a bunch of general managers and we would give them a change. And we'd say, okay, go do it, right? Y'all just go do it. Make sure it happens. Every store. And then 6 months later, we'd be in the store and we'd be like, why aren't you doing this? We've told you to do this 6 weeks ago. Why is this not done? We would get so frustrated and so mad. It's not their fault, right? We didn't hold them accountability and follow up regularly to make sure that they had implemented and had created a habit, right? That wasn't their fault. That was our fault as leaders. Change will also fail if you introduce too many behaviors at once. And again, we'd sit around that table and be like, hey guys, here's 10 changes. Go make it happen. And be like, oh, where do we even start? And then halfway through the week, we might say, oh, and here's 2 more that we forgot about, right? And so it created so much frustration because we didn't give them one change, allow them to implement it, take a breath, right? Create a habit before we are throwing more things at them. Change also fails because those closest to the process aren't included in design change or change design. So instead of just sitting around a table at the office saying, hey, that'd be a great idea, let's improve this, right? And then telling everybody and then having them say, oh, we could have told you that wouldn't work. So now we got to go redo it all over again, right? Instead of going to them first to test it, get their input before we then finalized a change and rolled that out. Saved you a lot of time, trust me. Change also fails because of distraction of leadership and no follow through. And I will say this is one of the biggest ones that will lose all credibility for you as a leader. So here's what we did. We would roll out this great, beautiful change, tell them to go do it. And then they would say, oh, hey, you forgot to update the POS system. Or, hey, you forgot to update training. So now we're training people with the old process, right? Or you forgot to provide us the tools and resources that we needed, right? Because we weren't following through all the way, right? Making sure something was 100% ready to go before we rolled out that change. And then finally, change will fail because it's not communicated clearly. So I go back to that table where we're sitting there with all of those general managers, telling them to go make this change happening. And one GM that was really, really excited about it, he'd go back to his store and say, all right, this is going to be awesome, right? We're doing it this way now. And the people would be like, yay, this is so great. We love this. It's so much better. And then another GM would go to their store and say, here you go. Got to do it this way now. Well, why? I don't know. Corporate just told us. All right. Who was successful in implementing that change? Right? I can tell you, it wasn't the guy that just said, just cuz. Okay. So we learned that you have to communicate clearly. All right. So what did we learn that year and what did we change? Well, we learned how to be leaders of change. Number one, we stopped calling them changes. Again, that 19-year-old, you tell them they got to do something different, they got to change, you're like, all right, what's coming, right? If you say, hey, it's an improvement, right? All of a sudden that sounds way better to their job than change does, right? So we started calling them improvements. And then we developed one simple method. We called this a process improvement communication process, PICF for short. So here's what we did on one single form. We eliminated all of those reasons for why changes fail on this one form. All right. So we would first identify the old process and then the new and improved process. We would identify all of the implementation steps that had to happen before we rolled it out, kind of like a checklist. And then we identified, where did this crazy idea come from, right? Was it from a guest? Was it from a team member? Did we learn it? Where did the idea come from? And then we identified how it affects team members, how it makes us better, and then what key business driver or core value it affected, right? Going right back to the why. Okay, so in this particular example, this was for Mighty Fine burgers, fries, and shakes. And so we opened up Mighty Fine, we had French fries on the menu. Years later, we added onion rings to the menu. And we would get a lot of requests from guests saying, hey, I don't want both, but do you have like one that's got both in it? Yeah. So we were getting a lot of feedback and suggestions from guests. So we ended up creating then a ring. All right. So the old process was we had French fries and we had onion rings. Okay. Simple. And if guests ask, well, sorry, that's what we got. You have to get both. So the new process or the improved process is that now we will have this ring, right? So if a guest asks for it, you can give them that option, right? It's not going to be on the menu board. So you're going to have to be prompted by the guest, to let them know that that's an option, right? And it's basically a half and half combination. So the implementation steps included, right? listening to team members and our guests, but the implementation steps included, right, testing it, okay, updating training, okay, making sure that we had the button on the POS, right, making sure that we trained all of our people, and then that we communicated it out system-wide so that everybody, even at Rudy's, because we had Rudy's at the same time, knew that this was an option at Mighty Fine. So how does this affect team members? Well, they're going to have to learn something new, but we felt like it'd be pretty easy for them to do. And then how it makes us better, it's a win-win, right, for our guests and for us. And then the key business driver that it affected was value, because it's a perception for our guests. And then it didn't really have a core value, so to speak, that it affected other than our guest community. So every improvement was rolled out using this very simple form. Okay? Communicated to every team member, face-to-face, one-on-one, so they could ask questions if they needed to. And then we also had an archive for this so that we could track all of the changes and improvements that we made over the years. So, culture of excellence. It is step-by-step, but it's all about creating habits, right? It's not a one-time thing, right? It's truly a culture, and it's really the responsibility of leaders to make sure that they're creating the right culture.